Hello, everyone. Welcome to KPMG's Global Life Sciences Summit and this special session on purpose and impact, where we will be discussing ESG reporting and specifically the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. Why? Because we believe that 2024 is going to be the year of disclosure. My name is Michael Wagemans. I'm the managing partner of ESG and sustainability at KPMG Belgium, and I also lead ESG in life sciences at the EMA level. I have two very esteemed ESG professionals with me here today. Our own Nasrin Moola, who is affiliated as ESG Reporting and Assurance Director at KPMG in the UK. And then Sarah Dyson, who heads corporate responsibility at GSK, and in that capacity is very much at work at embedding ESG considerations in strategy and operations, but is also responsible for ESG reporting, disclosure, and ratings. Nasrin, Sarah, I'm very much looking forward to this discussion, so the floor is very much yours. Please take it away.
Thank you very much, Michael, and thank you for being with us today, Sarah. I look forward to delving into GSK's ESG reporting journey. But before we get into everything that is reporting, I know from our previous discussions that GSK sees ESG reporting not just as a reporting and compliance exercise, but that is a strategic imperative. Can you provide more detail on how GSK has embedded ESG and responsible business into the way it operates?
Yeah, happily, and thank you for inviting me to speak with you today. So GSK, our purpose is to unite science, technology and talent to get ahead of disease together and to positively impact the health of 2.5 billion people. And so ESG is a really important part of our business strategy to support growth, build trust, reduce risk and deliver positive social impact. And so our approach to ESG is centred around 6 core areas: access to health, global health and health security, environment, diversity, equity and inclusion, ethical standards and product governance. And those areas are important to our stakeholders and important to our business. We measure our ESG performance through a corporate KPI, the ESG performance rating. And this is something that we introduced in 2022. The purpose is to drive performance through the business and to provide greater transparency in our ESG reporting. This rating measures performance against those 6 areas I mentioned and has a series of metrics underneath each of those 6 focus areas. The executive leadership team, the GLT, are accountable for embedding ESG into their business. They and the board, through the Corporate Responsibility Committee, regularly review all aspects of ESG, actually, but also review the performance and the metrics for the rating to make sure that they're sufficiently challenging, ambitious, and on track with performance.
That's really interesting. And definitely that level of continuous monitoring and leadership buy-in will put you on the front foot when we're thinking of some of the new changes within the reporting landscape, especially those that we've seen within the last 24 months, such as Michael touched on earlier, the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive coming out of the EU, CSRD. Also, additional measures like the proposed SEC climate rule that we're thinking of outside within the US, as well as some of the reporting frameworks that we've seen, whether that be the IFRS standards for sustainability or voluntary elements like TNFD. So as a multi-jurisdictional organization with many of these new and emerging changes in ESG reporting expected to either be mandatory or things that you will voluntarily adopt, how are you as GSK tackling the complexity of the reporting landscape?
Good question. And GSK is pretty much in scope for all of the reporting regulations. I'd categorise us as a mature reporter. We've been ESG reporting for a long time. I've been with the company for 12 years, and our reporting predates me. But even so, regulations such as the CSRD will have a significant impact on our reporting. Obviously there are some knowns. So we know when we'll be in scope for CSRD. But, there are some unknowns, like you mentioned, the SEC climate, that we don't yet know what that's going to look like or when that'll be implemented. Then, there's the voluntary reporting as well. So I'm a task force member of TNFD. So I'm delighted that GSK is an early adopter to the framework. But, if we were to take all of that sort of landscape, it's been clear for a while now, even if you don't know exactly when some of these new reporting regulations will become mandatory, it's clear that direction of travel is towards more reporting regulations. There are probably two key themes. One is quantity of data, and the other is level of assurance. So probably 2022, actually, we started thinking about, what this trend was telling us. Last year, we set up an ESG data reporting hub in finance, and they are now accountable for ESG data processes, collation, governance, assurance. And that was really to sort of get us on the front foot, just prepared for these new reporting regulations.
That's really helpful. Thank you for that, Sarah. So to pick up on one of the areas that you touched on there, which is CSRD implementation, and we know that even for companies like GSK that are mature reporters, CSRD implementation is going to be something that is incredibly challenging. How are you approaching CSRD implementation within GSK?
Yes, so you're right. It's complex. So as a headquarters company, we obviously have done work to understand how we're in scope for CSRD. And we've done a couple of things internally. We have a steering committee, which is sort of meets regularly. I sit on that steering committee, and we're monitoring progress towards implementing CSRD. We've also got a couple of pieces of work that are working in parallel. So because we've done materiality assessments for many years now, we have a good understanding of what our material issues are. So we're using what we already know from our current reporting, our current data sets, and our material issues to run pilots for CSRD. And at the same time, we are conducting a CSRD aligned double materiality assessment. And then we'll bring those two pieces of work together and then start to do readiness assessments through the year in order to be compliant when we need to be. So that's really how we're sort of trying to set ourselves up for it.
Perfect. And that does sound like it involves a significant level of coordination across the organization. How are you engaging and involving various parts of the organization, such as finance? I know you touched on finance earlier, as well as risk within the implementation process.
This isn't work that you can do on your own. So, on the data side, even the materiality assessment, obviously working with subject matter experts across the business. So that covers, touches the entire business. I think also from a sort of double materiality assessment perspective, working very closely with our risk management team, that, they have already established processes for assessing financial materiality, for example. So really leveraging the work that they've done, partnering with the finance risk team as well. I'd say those are the two teams that I'm probably working most closely with. Then obviously the subject matter experts who are providing input as well.
And really dragging that forward a little bit and thinking about the data in and of itself. I know we spoke about, the extent of data that you'd require in order to comply with CSRD. And a lot of that being quite granular and in a lot of cases not from within the organization and so contributed from the value chain. What are some of the challenges that you've faced in obtaining that level of granular data, especially in areas where it's not coming from the business or it's an emerging or judgmental metric that is trying to be calculated? And how are you managing those challenges?
Yeah, so I don't think you'd find a company that wouldn't say that Scope 3 is a challenge. It's always going to be a challenge for companies. We've been reporting against Scope 3 for a long time. It's a significant area of focus for us. It's the majority of our carbon footprint. We work very closely with other business functions, such as procurement. We have a sustainable procurement programme, which has a particular focus on our top 30 suppliers. By climate and nature impact. That requires suppliers to take action on climate and nature. We also do deep dives with those key suppliers to identify opportunities to reduce energy and water. We hold roundtables with suppliers to address common challenges. Supply chain issues aren't just, they're a challenge for the sector as well. So working with our peers across the industry is also important. And I think what's also really what's been fascinating for me actually over the last few years is to see how nature reporting's really evolved. 2020 we set an environmental strategy for net zero and positive impacts on nature, and as part of that we've been heavily involved in helping to define some of those standards and reporting frameworks. We're one of the first groups of companies to work with Science Based Target Network to validate science-based targets for nature. And as I mentioned, I'm on the task force for TNFD as well. And so being part of the creation of TNFD and piloting that also really helps with sort of continuing to and evolve our targets, but also helps on the reporting side as well. But it's a dynamic area that's always changing.
Perfect. And with all of this change, I know we spoke about CSRD and the level of data that's going to be involved in that, as well as some of the other areas like TNFD that GSK will be reporting on for the first time. How do you consider or anticipate your reporting strategy to evolve to allow you to comply with these various regulations and frameworks while also allowing you to tell your story in a way that is authentically GSK?
Yeah, it's a really important question actually, and I think that's also why this session is called Purpose and Impact, right? Because you don't want to lose the purpose and impact. And whilst companies like GSK are inevitably focused on short-term need of having to make CSRD-ready disclosures, we need to take a step back and think about, well, what's the objective of this regulation? Why do we have it? What does the audience really want to see? Otherwise, you do get a bit too sort of focused on just the data, and that can only tell you so much. I think what the EU is trying to create is a world where capital's channeled towards sustainable business. You've got to keep that in the back of your mind. I think showing how ESG supports and transforms your business strategy, that transformation piece, that long-term growth that ESG can deliver, and how you are what your ESG performance is and why it's important. That's really important to not forget in the data. I think that companies have learned how to do this. So yes, the amount of ESG reporting regulations is unprecedented at the moment. I've been doing this a while and I've never known it quite like this before. But we've had voluntary reporting frameworks in the past. So, take GRI, for example, and companies like GSK still telling the story, demonstrating how ESG is important to the business, and whilst publishing GRI sort of compliant sort of reports, depending on which level you want to take that to. And so we make it very clear for those audiences, if they want to see where the GRI indicator is, then go to the GRI index and you'll be able to find it in the report. So I think it's going to be a steep learning curve, but I think we need to remember what we've already established and learned over the years, and not, as you say, forget to tell the story. Otherwise, you do lose that purpose and impact.
And I think that's a really important point to note. And I think, something that a lot of organizations are finding challenging, but something that's important to not lose sight of. So moving on to something that you touched on a little earlier, Sarah, around ESG assurance on the information that is going to be prepared for CSRD. How are you preparing yourself with enhanced assurance requirements that is coupled with CSRD?
Yeah, so, as you say, this is why we set up the ESG data reporting hub, because we could see this coming. And, we had, like many companies, really, we had separate teams running the data assurance for their areas of the business. So my team was responsible for some, the environmental team was responsible for theirs. But as the requirements become more and more, it makes more sense to bring that together into for us, it made more sense to put that into finance. It could be different for different companies, and really set them up to be accountable for the governance and the assurance. And, it's the first year, 2023 is the first year it's been operational. So they've done all the data for this year's report and all the assurance as well, and it's working really well. So we have subject matter experts across the business. We have my team doing the narrative. We have finance doing the data, and so far it's worked really well for us. But I think that whatever different ways of doing it for different companies, but I think really setting up your capabilities to be able to deal with this level of data assurance is going to be critical for success for companies.
Thank you, Sarah. Really insightful. So finally, maybe just to round up, I think there'll be a lot of companies like GSK who are on the journey, not just to CSRD compliance, but enhanced ESG reporting. What are some of the top tips you have for those companies who are navigating their way through this right now?
Sure. Okay. So I'd say firstly at a more macro level, I think if you don't already have ESG trends and regulation monitoring set up, then think about doing that, because that's going to help you monitor what's coming down the pipeline. Some of those are really obvious and you can't wake up in the morning without knowing what they are, but some of them will just pop up and you have no idea. So, making sure that you're covering the markets and that not just the big global regulations, but, take notice of really where you're operating. So, it could be California or, Europe for human rights. That monitoring is really important and something that, my team's accountable for at GSK. Understanding how you're in scope for the regulations as well. So sometimes it'll be at a global level, sometimes it's an entity level, and decide what your approach is going to be and to upskill those markets if you need to. Do gap analyses and readiness assessments. It's really valuable to do. Take the time and plan those readiness assessments. Again, to your point about other business functions and working across the business, think about how you leverage expertise across the business. So finance and risk management, for example, they have great expertise that can be used for this, for ESG reporting. And I suppose lastly, remember you're not alone. Like, you're really not alone. It feels like you are sometimes, but you're not. And so talk to peers and join networks, because everyone will be having similar challenges. And so, working with other companies and peers and consultancies can really help you think through what your approach is going to be.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for your time today, Sarah. And Michael, I'm going to hand back over to you for final comments.
Yeah, thank you, Nasrin. And thanks, Sarah, both of you, for this insightful conversation. I think there's 2 points I noted down in a sense as takeaways. One is, I think, the inherent complexity of CSRD. We spoke about the multi-jurisdictional nature, the multifunctional/disciplinary nature, the issues with quantification and data, the fact that the landscape, the regulatory landscape, is still evolving, and we do not quite know where we're heading to. So I think that element of complexity and then the planning and the management that comes with it, that's an important point to make. And then I think the second point, and it's perhaps the most important one, it's something that Sarah voiced, is that CSRD, it's not just about compliance with the directive. There's a bigger objective why companies are doing this. And so if I could summarize it, perhaps it is a very good tool for better decision making to transition the business. And I think that is perhaps a key point that we could take away from this session as well. So from my side, and also on behalf of Nasrin and Sarah, thank you very much for being with us today, and au revoir.
Thank you.